You're watching SMNI. This is Business and Politics. I'm Dante Klink Ang. Senator, let's continue our discussion on education. Very interesting. There's so much to discuss, but I'm a little frustrated because I can only focus on a few things. There are those who say that the education reform initiatives really should start with teacher reform. And you've been very vocal about increasing their salaries. But maybe you can explain more what's needed to be done on that particular front.
I'll explain two things. One on teacher education and one on teacher morale. And we found out that here in Southeast Asia, we're actually third to the lowest when it comes to teacher salaries. The two lowest countries,
Cambodia,
Cambodia, Laos and Myanmar. Laos and Myanmar. And these are developing nations. So we need to at least be at the middle of the pack. So I filed a bill to increase teacher salary from salary grade 11 to salary grade 13. I wish it can be more, but we have to be practical also. With 800,000 teachers, our proposal will already require close to about 60 billion pesos. So,
well, how far are we? If we're
our entry level, just to give
in terms of nominal,
just to give our audience an idea, an entry-level teacher is about 27,000. Just to give you a comparison, Indonesia, which is in the highest of the pack, their entry level is about 50,000.
Wow.
So Indonesia puts a lot of premium in teacher morale also. So we're just raising it a bit, to put it at least in the middle of the pack. And from 27,000, we're raising it to about 37,000, 38,000 entry-level teachers. So that will improve teacher morale. Teacher education as well is very important. And in the last Congress, in the 18th Congress, we managed to get a bill approved. It's called the Excellence in Teacher Education Act, in which this law will put a lot of emphasis in teacher education at the pre-service level, which is the college level. And at the same time, when they enter the teaching force, we will also put a lot of emphasis on their training while teaching.
Again, playing devil's advocate, I don't think anyone would argue about the need to pay teachers higher. The problem, however, at least coming from the private education sector, is that they feel that they've been left behind. And then they are arguing that they deserve more attention from the government because they actually play a public-private partnership in education. Is there any discussion on maybe including the teachers in the private education sector in some of these benefits, if not salaries, maybe other benefits just to compensate?
Correct. The private schools are a partner in education, and they provided education in areas where no public schools are present. And we have to recognize that in education, we should not look at private and public.
Separate.
All kids are important to us. There's a mechanism actually to help. I know this is a big issue. There's now a very big gap between the public school salaries and the private school salaries. And a lot of our private school teachers actually transfer to the public school. There's actually a law, it's called the GASPE law, in which subsidies are being given to the private school teachers in order for them to at least be at par with public school teacher salaries. Admittedly, it's a budgetary issue, but I'm also working on that so that we can at least put at par the salaries of private school teachers.
I was going to ask that because, given the mood of the country today with high gas prices and inflation, is there, you think, enough political space there to also add
it's very challenging. That's why the Ways and Means Committee actually is there's also a lot of pressure in that committee because the job of the Ways and Means Committee is to find revenue, or to improve revenue collection. But you're absolutely correct with our debt going up as high as 60+% of our GDP. Fiscal space is very narrow. So the challenge there is to grow our economy, find new ways of adding revenue. Hopefully the incremental increase will be channeled to teacher salary and morale.
But one other program is the voucher system, I think, which is also good. So this goes to the students who can choose now to attend a public or private school. I remember in the budget hearings of DepEd in the Senate, that you were, I think, asking them about unfilled teacher positions,
Yes.
and you had brought up the idea of why don't we use some of that money for more vouchers? Is that something that's possible, or?
It's a good point, no? Because of government bureaucracy, there's always unfilled teacher positions in government. If I remember it correctly, it's as high as about 30,000 unfilled teacher positions in government. And the reason for that is bureaucracy, because when you hire teachers, the paper goes to CSC and then it goes back and all of these things. No? I remember Secretary Biones said that to hire a teacher takes about 8 months.
Wow.
No? So it takes that's almost one school year. No? So the concept there is, since half of our senior high school students are already studying in private schools, and private schools generally are more nimble and they can respond faster. I'm seriously studying how to channel some of the unappropriated funds to our voucher system so that we can use the nimbleness and the responsiveness of our private schools in order to satisfy the requirements of our public schools. So for example, if we are lacking teachers in public school, let's channel the funds there to our private school because they can use the funds quicker than government. And it will fulfill actually the same goal, no, of educating our students.
In a previous editorial that we've written in the Manila Times, we've said that the private sector can be a force multiplier. Would you agree with that observation in this regard? Because you have congested schools, you have the voucher systems that could possibly address that, among other things, of course.
Correct.
But is that something is that the right mindset, really? Because people think of sometimes the private education sector as competition for the public school, which you said is not the appropriate mindset. But is that something that can be done?
In my opinion, we're educating our future. So it should not be looked at private versus public, but private and public educating the future citizens of our country. Of course, along the way, there will be a lot of imbalances, and we just have to resolve the imbalances. That's why I'm working very closely with our private school system on how to improve the concept of complementarity, which is enshrined in our Constitution. And one of which is the voucher system. The voucher system is actually a good example of this complementarity. Half of our senior high school students are studying in our private schools. Government is subsidizing their education. We're actually thinking of expanding that to junior high school and even elementary. In our opinion, it's cheaper to fund a voucher than building a school, no? Because building a school takes...
You don't have the structure, you don't have the bureaucracy.
So much time and bureaucracy. So that principle can be carried over to our junior high school students, even to elementary students. And that's something that we're studying very carefully.
Since you brought it up, is that something that deserves to be part of EDCOM too? Because some people in the private sector complain that there's never been an implementing law, so they've been sort of guessing, what their role is or importance in the education system. But is there a roadmap?
Yes, EDCOM 2 will be focused on learner outcomes and learner performance. And admittedly, in the PISA results, a lot of our private schools perform better in terms of learner outcomes compared to our public schools. No? So that's something to study also, because they're small. Just imagine a private school is just one school, and then they're focused on their students. No? And the management is closer to the students, so they can respond faster. That's something that we can use and maximize in our country, because DepEd is such a big agency. Half of our public servants actually work in DepEd, no? And that's how big. And the structure is quite big, no? And that's why they respond a little bit slower when it comes to reforms and other projects. So we can balance it by using the private school structure and their responsiveness.
The education system, some researchers have said that software is going to play a more important role. How do we account for that? Maybe in the plans that we're talking about teacher education, but in some countries they're already talking about teachers taking a supporting role and software taking a more prominent one.
Actually, Klink, that's a good point. Some senators filed bills on teaching coding, and coding is actually programming,
Basic,
because everything will be digital in the future. The world will become more digitalized, and this is an industry that we need to exploit. Right now, we're just doing a lot of the voice BPO, a lot of the very simple concepts in BPOs, but we haven't really gone into coding, which is a
high value added.
higher value, requires higher thinking and analysis, and this can be taught and embedded in our basic education curriculum. Some of our senators saw that, they filed bills to that effect, so we'll be looking at that also, so that we can, because we have to realize that the students we're teaching right now will be the citizens 18, 20 years, 21 years down the road. So we need to make sure that they're being taught with the skills that are required 20 years down the road.
Right, and of course, we'll talk about how we will pay for that in our next segment. So please don't go away. This is SMNI's Business and Politics. We're talking to Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.